Hello and welcome. It is time to let the day and all of its concerns simply fade away. Find your most comfortable position and gently close your eyes. Let's begin with a single, slow, deep breath. Breathe in deeply, and as you breathe out, feel the tension begin to leave your body. There is nothing else you need to do tonight, nothing to focus on, and nothing to remember. The story I am about to tell is just a quiet murmur in the background, a calm and steady presence. Tonight we will travel back to the 15th century to a quiet forge in the mountains of Japan. To hear the story of the quiet craft of a Japanese swordsmith, just relax and allow the sound of my voice to accompany you as you drift towards a deep and peaceful sleep. Our story begins in the year 1480 in the late autumn. The mountains of Bizen province are a tapestry of crimson and gold, and the air is crisp with a clean, cold clarity. Our setting is not a bustling city or a battlefield, but a simple, unadorned wooden building. A forge, or kaji, nestled beside a fast-flowing mountain stream. From the outside, it is a humble structure of dark, weathered wood, its thatched roof heavy with moss. But inside, a process that is part alchemy, part art, and part religious ceremony is about to begin. The day for the master swordsmith, a man named Masahiro, does not begin with the lighting of the forge, but with an act of purification. Rises before dawn and makes his way to the mountain stream. There, in the icy rushing water, he performs mizagi, a ritual cleansing, splashing the frigid water over his body to purify his mind and spirit of any lingering distractions. He then returns to the forge, which is as much a temple as it is a workshop. He is dressed not in heavy work clothes, but in the clean, white linen garments of a Shinto priest. In the corner of the forge is a small, elevated altar, a kamidana, marked by a rope of woven rice straw called a shimanawa. Here he lights a stick of incense and offers a silent prayer to the kami, the spirits of the mountain, the fire, and the metal itself. He is not merely a craftsman preparing for a day of labor. He is a priest preparing to coax a soul from the raw, chaotic heart of the earth. Only when these preparations are complete does the physical work begin. Today, Masahiro will begin the long and arduous process of creating a single blade, a katana. The journey begins with the steel itself. He goes to a heavy wooden box in the corner of the forge and lifts the lid. Inside is a strange and beautiful substance, tamahagane, or jewel steel. It is the raw product of a tatara, a grate. Traditional clay furnace that has been fed with black iron sand and charcoal for 3 days and 3 nights. The result is not a uniform ingot of steel, but a great, spongy, and multicolored bloom of metal, weighing thousands of pounds, which has been broken into smaller, fist-sized chunks. This is the chaotic soul of the sword, a mixture of different steels. Masahiro's first task is one of careful, patient selection. He takes the chunks of tamahagane, and one by one he inspects them. He looks at their color, at the crystalline structure, at the way they fracture. With a small hammer he taps each piece, listening intently to the sound it makes. A high clear ring signifies a high carbon content. This is hagane, the hard brittle steel that will form the blade's razor edge. A lower duller thud signifies a lower carbon content. This is shengane, the softer, tougher, more ductile steel that will form the sword's supportive core, giving it the ability to bend without breaking. This process takes several hours. It is a slow, quiet, and deeply intuitive dialogue between the smith and his material. There is no scientific measurement, only the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime. The wisdom passed down through generations of his family. He carefully sorts the chunks of steel into different piles, his mind already beginning to visualize how these rough, ugly pieces of metal will eventually be combined into a single perfect blade. When the selection is complete, the fire is brought to life. The forge is a simple, low hearth of packed earth and clay. The fuel is not coal, but the finest quality pine charcoal, matsuzumi, which burns with a clean, intense, and easily controlled heat. His apprentice, a young boy named Kenji, begins to work the great bellows. The fuigo, a large, box-like contraption that is operated by pushing a long wooden handle back and forth. The bellows let out a soft, rhythmic sigh, a deep mechanical breath that feeds air to the charcoal, causing the embers to glow with a fierce orange-white heat. Masahiro begins the construction of the billet. He takes the best, highest carbon pieces of hagen he has selected and arranges them on the end of a long iron handle. He wraps the chunks in a sheet of rice paper and coats the entire package with a thin, wet slurry of clay and ash. This coating will protect the steel from the air as it heats, preventing it from oxidizing and losing its precious carbon. He then plunges the billet into the heart of the glowing charcoal. Now, another period of patient observation begins. He does not use a clock or a thermometer. His only guide is the color of the heating steel. He watches with an unwavering, intense focus as the dark metal begins to glow. First a dull cherry red, then a brighter orange, finally a brilliant yellow-white, the color of the morning sun. This is the welding heat. With a sharp command, he signals to his apprentice. The billet is pulled from the fire, a radiant incandescent mass of metal that illuminates the dark forge. It is placed on the great dark anvil, and the hammering begins. The sound is a sharp, powerful, and ringing clang that echoes through the small building. Masahiro wields a heavy, long-handled sledgehammer, his movements a blur of controlled power and precision. The apprentice stands opposite him with a smaller hammer, striking in the moments between the master's blows. It is a rhythmic, percussive duet, a conversation conducted in the language of hammer and steel. The first blows are not to shape the steel, but to consolidate it, to weld the dozen or so separate chunks of tamahagen into a single, solid, rectangular block. The shower of brilliant orange sparks that erupts with every hammer blow is the visual sign of the impurities, the slag being violently expelled from the steel. The metal is hammered, reheated, and hammered again until it is a single, unified, and purified block. This is the first step on a journey of 1,000 repetitions. The rough, composite block is now a single piece of steel. It has no shape, no edge, no soul. But it is ready for the next, most crucial, and most famous part of the process, the folding. The simple block of metal is about to begin its slow, laborious, and transformative journey into becoming the soul of a sword. The rectangular block of freshly welded steel, the hagen that will form the blade's edge, now rests on the anvil, glowing with a dull cherry red heat. The first chaotic stage of its birth is over. Now the long and deeply meditative process of purification and refinement begins. This is the art of folding the steel, a technique that transforms the raw, brittle metal into a substance of legendary strength and beauty. Masahiro places the block back into the heart of the charcoal fire. His apprentice Kenji works the bellows, his movements steady and rhythmic, sending a focused river of air into the embers. The master watches the steel with an unwavering gaze, his entire consciousness focused on the changing color of the metal. The dull red brightens to a vibrant orange, and then to a brilliant, almost white yellow. This is the heat of creation. He pulls the block from the forge and places it on the anvil. With a heavy, sharp chisel and a sledgehammer, he scores a deep line down the center of the block. He then returns the steel to the fire, reheating it to the same brilliant intensity. Now comes the first fold. He places the glowing, scored block on the anvil, and with a series of powerful, precise hammer blows, he folds the block back upon itself, along the line of the chisel cut. What was a single solid block is now a thick, U-shaped bar of 2 layers. This 2-layered bar is then immediately returned to the fire. It is coated with a wet slurry of clay and ash to prevent oxidation, and it is heated once more to a perfect welding temperature. Back on the anvil, the rhythmic duet of the hammers begins again. The blows are not random. They're carefully patterned, working from the center of the block outwards, forcing out the trapped air and the last of the liquid slag. The 2 layers are fused, becoming one again. A single block now, twice as dense, twice as pure as it was before. This process is the fundamental rhythm, the sacred heartbeat of the swordsmith's craft. And it is a process that must be repeated again and again. Again, the new, thicker block is heated to a glowing intensity. Again, the chisel is used to score its surface, this time perpendicular to the first fold. Again, it is folded back upon itself. And again, it is heated and hammered, the now 4 layers of steel being forge welded into a new solid whole. With each fold, the steel is purified. The violent percussive force of the hammer is a tool of refinement, squeezing out the last of the microscopic impurities, the tiny pockets of slag that would create a flaw in the finished blade. With each fold, the carbon within the steel is more evenly distributed. The raw tamahagajane is an inconsistent material, with areas that are carbon-rich and areas that are carbon-poor. The folding process is a kind of mechanical alchemy, mixing and blending these elements, ensuring that the final material has a consistent, uniform, and reliable character. And with each fold, a new layer is born. What begins as 2 layers becomes 4. 4 become 8. 8 becomes 16. 16 become 32. It is an exponential journey into complexity. Masahiro will perform this ritual a dozen times or more. By the 10th fold, the block of steel contains over 1,000 distinct microscopic layers. By the 13th fold, it contains over 8,000. The work is a trance of fire and rhythm. For hours, the forge is filled with the same repeating cycle of sounds. The soft, sighing breath of the bellows, the roar of the charcoal fire, the sharp, ringing clang of the hammers, the sizzle of hot metal being quenched in the water trough. Masahiro's movements are a study in efficiency. He seems to be in a state of deep meditation, his mind focused only on the task at hand. He reads the state of the steel and its color, in the sound the hammer makes against it, and the way it moves on the anvil. He is not imposing his will upon the metal. He is in a dialogue with it, listening to it, guiding it, helping it to become the best version of itself. His apprentice, Kenji, is his other half. He is the Sakite, the ahead hand. He wields the great sledgehammer, his powerful youthful muscles providing the brute force. But his blows are not his own. He watches his master's small, guiding hammer, and he times his own strikes to land a perfect instant after the master's, adding his strength to the master's precision. It is a relationship of perfect, nonverbal trust and communication, a dance that has been practiced for 1,000 days until it is as natural as breathing. Finally, after hours of this relentless repetitive labor, the process for this billet is complete. The block of steel that Masahiro places on the anvil to cool is still a simple rectangular shape. To an untutored eye, it would look much the same as the block he started with. But Masahiro knows the truth. He looks at the dark, unremarkable block of steel, and he sees the thousands of invisible layers hidden within it. He sees the purity that has been forged in the fire, the strength that has been born from the hammer's relentless blows. This is the Hagen, the outer skin, the cutting edge of the future sword. It is still just a block of metal. It has no form, no grace, no purpose. But its soul, its inner character, has been created. It has been purified by the fire, tested by the hammer, and is now ready to be given its form. The long, arduous process of folding the hard hicarbon steel is complete. The block of Hagen lies on the cool stone floor beside the anvil, its dark, heat-scaled surface belying the thousands of layers hidden within. But the work is only half finished. A sword made purely from this hard steel would be sharp, but it would be brittle as glass, shattering at the first powerful blow. A blade needs more than just a sharp edge. It needs a resilient heart. It needs a soul of a different character. Now your master Masahiro turns his attention to the second pile of steel chunks he so carefully selected this morning. This is the shingane, the softer, lower carbon core steel. He will now begin the entire painstaking process all over again, but with a different intention, a different goal in mind. Once more the chunks of raw steel are stacked, wrapped in paper, coated in clay, and brought to a welding heat in the fiery heart of the forge. Once more, the rhythmic, percussive duet of the master's hammer and the apprentice's sledgehammer fills the small, smoky building, welding the disparate pieces into a single solid billet. And once more, the slow, meditative ritual of folding begins. The block is heated, chiseled, folded, and forge welded. But you, the apprentice, notice a subtle but crucial difference in the master's work. He is just as focused, his movements just as precise, but the process is shorter. He does not fold this softer steel as many times as he did the hard steel. Where the Hagen was folded a dozen times or more, the shingane is folded perhaps only 6 or 7 times. The goal here is not to create a blade of ultimate purity and microscopic layering. The goal is to create a core of ultimate toughness and resilience. The softer steel contains fewer impurities to begin with, and folding it too many times would work harden it, making it lose the very softness and ductility that is its primary virtue. A swordsmith must know not only how to purify steel, but also when to stop. It is another lesson in the profound, intuitive metallurgy of his craft. After several more hours of this rhythmic labor, the second billet is complete. It, too, is a simple, dark, rectangular block, and to an uninitiated eye it looks identical to the first. The two blocks lie side by side on the floor of the forge, cooling in the dimming afternoon light. They are the twin souls of the sword, born of the same raw earth, but given different characters through the skill and intention of the smith. One is the Hagen. It is the father, the outer form. It is hard, aggressive, and uncompromising. its purpose to cut. Its internal structure is a complex, almost infinite web of layers, refined to an incredible degree of purity. The other is the shingen. It is the mother, the inner core. It is softer, more forgiving, and resilient, its purpose to absorb shock and to endure. Its structure is simpler, less refined, but no less essential. One without the other is useless. The hard steel alone would shatter. The soft steel alone would bend and never hold an edge. Only when they are brought together in a perfect, harmonious union will they create a blade that is both lethally sharp and virtually unbreakable. As the sun begins to set behind the high mountain peaks, the day's forging is done. The last of the charcoal in the hearth is allowed to burn down to a bed of soft gray ash. The fire, the great creative and destructive heart of the forge, is put to rest. The final act of the day is one of quiet, mindful cleaning. You and the master sweep the dusty, earth-packed floor. You put the hammers and the chisels back in their proper places on the wooden racks. You quench the last of the hot tools in the water trough, the final, satisfying hiss of the day. This, too, is part of the practice. Clean and ordered workspace reflects a clean and ordered mind. With the forge now quiet, clean, and sinking into the deep shadows of twilight, Masahiro sits on a low wooden stool. He does not look at the 2 blocks of steel he has spent an entire day of his life creating, simply sits in the quiet, his eyes closed, his breathing slow. He is in a state of quiet contemplation, of recovery, of gathering his spirit for the next, more artful phase of the work. You have spent a full day in the forge, and you have not yet seen anything that looks like a sword. You've only seen 2. Simple, unremarkable-looking blocks of dark, rough metal. But you have witnessed the most fundamental and laborious part of the entire craft. You have seen the soul of the steel being born. The raw, chaotic, and impure earth has been transformed through immense labor, through fire, and through a deep traditional wisdom into the 2 perfected materials from which a masterpiece will be made. The stage is now set. Tomorrow the master will give that soul its body. A new day dawns over the mountain forge. Once again, the master smith, Masahiro, begins his day with the ritual purification in the cold, clear stream, and with a silent prayer at the Katana in the corner of his workshop. The work of the previous day, the creation of the 2 distinct billets of steel, was a battle of purification, of forcing order upon the raw chaos of the Tamahagen. Today's work is one of creation, of uniting these 2 purified souls and giving them the form of a blade. The forge is brought back to life, the bellows sighing, the charcoal glowing with a fierce, clean heat. The 2 rectangular blocks of steel, the hard, multi-layered hagen, and the softer, tougher shingen, are brought to the fire. They have rested and cooled through the night, and they are now ready to be joined. This is the process of lamination, or tsukurikomi, and it is perhaps the most crucial and skillful act of the entire forging process. It is the secret that gives the Japanese sword its legendary ability to be both incredibly sharp and incredibly resilient. Masahiro chooses a classic and highly effective method of construction, a technique known as kobus. His intention is to create a blade with a hard, razor-sharp skin and a soft, shock-absorbing core. First, he takes the block of soft-core steel, the shingen. He heats it in the forge, and with a series of quick, efficient hammer blows, he shapes it into a thick, rectangular bar, which will form the spine and the very heart of the sword. Next, he takes the block of hard-edged steel, the hagen, the steel that has been folded more than a dozen times and contains thousands of layers. He heats this block as well, and with an incredible display of skill, he hammers it out into a long, flat, and relatively thin plank, much longer than the core steel. Now comes the most delicate and important part of the construction. He takes the long, flat plank of hard steel, and while it is at a malleable, orange heat, he carefully and precisely folds it into a great U shape. He has created a long channel, a sheath of hard, precious-edged steel. Into this channel, he places the thick bar of softer core steel. He then hammers the sides of the U closed, completely enveloping the soft core within a hard protective skin. The only part of the soft core that remains exposed is what will become the back or spine of the blade. He now holds in his tongs a single composite billet. It is a bar of steel with two distinct personalities, two souls now brought together, ready to be permanently joined. This is the moment where a mistake, a single air bubble or impurity trapped between the layers, will create a fatal flaw that might only be revealed in the final polishing, or worse, in the heat of battle. The weld must be perfect. The composite billet is coated in the familiar slurry of clay and ash and plunged deep into the charcoal fire. Masahiro watches the heating process with an even greater intensity than before. The temperature must be exact to cool, and the two steels will not fuse. To hot, and the precious carbon in the edge steel will burn away, ruining its ability to hold an edge. He watches the color, waiting for that perfect, brilliant yellow-white glow. At the precise moment, he pulls it from the fire. The duet of the hammers begins, but it is different now. Sound is slightly duller, the blows more measured. Masahiro is not just trying to move the metal, he's trying to fuse it, to convince the two different types of steel to become one. The hammer blows rain down, forcing the crystalline structures of the hard and soft steel to merge, to interlock, to form a bond that is stronger than either metal was on its own. When he is satisfied that the weld is complete, a new phase of the work begins. This is the tsunobi, the process of drawing out the billet. For the next several hours, the rectangular block is heated and hammered in a long, rhythmic, and physically demanding process. The goal is no longer to fold and purify, but to elongate, to stretch the metal, to coax it from a thick block into the long, thin, basic form of a sword. Masahiro's control of his hammer is absolute. He uses different parts of the hammer's face, different angles of blows, to control the movement of the steel with an almost magical precision. The series of powerful, direct blows, he thins and lengthens the main body of the blade. With lighter, more angled blows, he begins to form the point at one end, the kisaki, then turns his attention to the other end, drawing out the rough, unfinished section of the tang, the nakago, the part of the blade that will eventually be hidden inside the hilt. As you, his apprentice, swing the great sledgehammer, you are in awe of his mastery. You are not just hitting a piece of metal. You are a participant in an act of profound transformation. The simple rectangular block is slowly, patiently, and gracefully being encouraged to reveal the shape that was hidden within it. After hours of this work, the tsunobi process is complete. The object that now lies cooling on the anvil is, for the first time, recognizably a sword. It is a thick, heavy, and still straight blade, its surface covered in a rough, dark scale of oxidized metal. It has no grace, no curve, no edge. It is the sword in its infancy, a crude but powerful outline of its final form. The two souls of the steel, the hard and the soft, have been united into a single body. The great creative work of the day is done. Masahiro inspects the rough blade, his eyes searching for any hint of a flaw in the weld. He sees none, gives a quiet, satisfied nod. The blade has been born. Now it must be refined, shaped, and prepared for its baptism of fire and water. With a composite billet of hard and soft steel now successfully forged and drawn out, the object on the anvil is a sword in its most primal elemental form. It is a crude, straight, and heavy bar of fire-scaled metal, holding only the faintest promise of the elegant and deadly weapon it is destined to become. The next stage of the work, the hizukuri, is to refine this raw potential, to give the blade its true geometry. This is a process that requires a different kind of hammering. The great heavy sledgehammer is set aside. Masahiro, the master smith, now works alone, using a series of smaller, lighter hammers, their faces shaped for different tasks. The work is no longer about moving a great mass of steel, but about making 1,000 small, precise adjustments. He reheats the blade, but only a small section at a time, to a lower, more controlled orange heat. His hammer blows are now light, rapid, and incredibly precise, a sound like a flurry of metallic rain. With these blows, he establishes the crisp, defining lines of the blade. He forms the shinogi, the distinct ridge line that runs along the side of the sword. He carefully bevels the planes of the cutting edge, creating the perfect wedge-like geometry that will allow the blade to cut with almost no resistance. He gives the tip, the kisaki, its final elegant shape, a task that is considered one of the most difficult and defining tests of a smith's skill. At this stage, the blade is still almost perfectly straight. The iconic, graceful curve of the katana, the sori, is not something that is hammered into the blade. It is a natural and beautiful consequence of the next most critical stage of the process, the hardening. Masahiro, however, with a few final expert blows, introduces a very slight, almost imperceptible curve to the spine of the blade, a preparatory shape that will guide the steel in its fiery transformation to come. When the final forging is complete, the blade is allowed to cool slowly, buried in the warm ash of the forge. The fire of its creation is over, for now. A new kind of work, a work of quiet, dusty, and patient shaping, is about to begin. This is the shiage, the finishing of the blade's shape with hand tools. Masahiro takes the cooled, fire-scaled blade to a wooden workbench. For the next several days, he will work on it with files, drawn-eaves, and scrapers. It is a slow, laborious, and deeply meditative process. He secures the blade and begins to work with a heavy, coarse file, the sound a loud, grating rasp as he strips away the black oxidized scale from the forging process. Beneath this rough crust, the raw, gray, living steel is revealed for the first time. He works his way down through a series of progressively finer files, his movements long, smooth, and even. He is not just cleaning the blade, he is perfecting its lines, ensuring every plane is flat, every ridge line is perfectly crisp and straight. It is a task of sculptural precision, and the floor around his workbench becomes covered in a fine metallic dust. When the filing is done, he takes up the sen, a type of draw knife, and begins to scrape the surface of the blade, his body leaning into the tool as he pulls it towards him, shaving off the thinnest of curls of steel. This final scraping removes all the file marks and gives the blade a smooth, uniform, and almost soft-looking surface. The blade is now a perfect, straight, and unadorned sculpture of raw gray steel. It is beautiful in its geometric purity, but it is still just a piece of soft, unhardened metal. It has the shape of a sword, but it does not yet have its deadly spirit. Now comes the most artistic and secretive part of the swordsmith's craft: the application of the insulating clay, a process called tsuchioki. The precise recipe for this clay, the yakubasuchi, is a closely guarded secret. It's passed down from master to apprentice, and it is what gives each school of swordsmithing its unique and recognizable character. It is a mixture of fine river clay, charcoal powder, and the powder of ground polishing stones. Masahiro mixes his clay in a stone bowl, adding water until it is a thick, smooth, gray paste. The first step is to coat the entire surface of the perfectly clean blade with a very thin uniform layer of this slurry. This thin layer will protect the blade during heating and ensure an even transfer of heat. When this initial coat is dry, the true artistry begins. Using a small wooden spatula, Masahiro begins to apply a much thicker, insulating layer of the clay to the parts of the blade he wishes to remain soft, the spine and the sides. He builds up the clay layer by layer till the upper two-thirds of the blade are encased in a thick, gray jacket, like a chrysalis. The final, crucial step is to define the pattern of the hamon, the temper line. The clay on the edge portion of the blade must remain very thin to allow it to cool quickly and become hard. But the shape of the boundary between the thick clay of the spine and the thin clay of the edge is not a simple straight line. With a series of small, specialized tools, thin bamboo spatula, a feather Masahiro begins to paint a pattern with the clay. He creates a gentle, undulating wave pattern along the length of the blade, a design known as notari. Just above this line, he adds a series of small, separate dabs of the clay, a pattern that will create islands of hardness in the softer steel, a feature known as tobiyaki. This is not a random act. He is painting a design using the clay as his medium that will be permanently etched into the very crystalline structure of the steel by the fire and the water to come. When he is finished, he inspects his work one final time. The blade is now completely encased in its custom-fitted jacket of gray clay. It looks dull, lifeless, an object of earth rather than of steel. It is carefully placed on a stand to dry, a process that must be slow and perfect. Any moisture trapped in the clay could turn to steam in the forge and cause the coating to flake off, ruining the entire process. It lies in its earthen shell, waiting for its baptism. With the final artistic touches applied to the clay coating, the blade is now complete in its earthen shell. But it is not yet ready for the fire. The clay, which was applied as a wet slurry, must now be allowed to dry, slowly, naturally, and perfectly. This is a period of enforced patience, a quiet and crucial interlude in the violent and fiery work of the forge. The clay-coated blade, the tsuchioki, is placed on a special stand in a warm, dry corner of the forge. For the next 24 hours, it will remain there, untouched. Any attempt to hasten the drying process with fire would create cracks in the clay, visible fissures that would prove catastrophic during the intense heat of the hardening. Smith Masahiro must simply wait. This waiting is not an idle time. It is a period of active, quiet preparation, both of the forge and of the smith's own mind. The day's remaining light is spent on these meticulous rituals. First, he prepares the fire that will be used for the final heating. He does not use the same charcoal that was used for the heavy work of forging and folding. He goes to a separate covered storage bin and selects the charcoal for the yaki ire, the quench. It is the finest quality pine charcoal made from trees that grew on a specific south-facing slope of the mountain, and fired in a way that makes it light, pure, and incredibly hot. He breaks the charcoal into perfectly uniform fist-sized pieces. A consistent and even fire is absolutely essential for the final heating, and it begins with the careful selection of each piece of fuel. Next, he turns his attention to the water. In the corner of the forge is the mizabun, the quenching trough. It is a long rectangular wooden box filled with water. This is not just any water. It was drawn from the mountain stream at a specific, auspicious time in the pre-dawn hours, when the water is at its coldest and he believes at its purest. The temperature of this water is critical. He dips his hand into the trough, feeling it with a sensitivity born of 1,000 previous quenches. It is the cold of a winter stream, a temperature he knows is perfect for the violent shock that the steel must endure. As the sun begins to set, casting long, deep shadows across the forge, the atmosphere begins to change. The forge, which during the day was a place of loud, percussive labor, now becomes a quiet, sacred space, like the inside of a temple. Masahiro hangs. New, white, zigzagging paper streamers, called shide, from the rope of the kamadana, the Shinto altar. These are symbols of purity. It's designed to ward off any negative influences or unlucky spirits that might interfere with the dangerous and almost magical process to come. He himself prepares his mind. He does not eat an evening meal. He fasts to keep his senses sharp and his spirit clear. He sits in a corner of the darkening forge in a posture of quiet meditation. He is not thinking about the steps of the process. They are as natural to him as breathing. He is emptying his mind of all distraction, of all ego, of all fear of failure, and all desire for success. He must become a simple, perfect instrument, a clear channel through which the spirit of the blade can be born. His own state of mind, he believes, will be transmitted directly into the steel at the moment of the quench. As twilight deepens into a moonless, star-filled night, he finally rises. The time is near. The drying of the clay is complete. He lifts the blade from its stand. It is surprisingly light. The clay is dried to a pale, chalky white, and it looks like a sculpted piece of rough pottery. He inspects every inch of the surface in the dim light of a single lantern. He is looking for any tiny cracks, any imperfections in the application that could cause a failure. He sees none. His work has been true. The forge is now completely dark, save for the lantern and the faint residual glow of the banked embers from the day's fire. This darkness is essential. The most important tool for the final heating is not a thermometer, but the smith's own eye. He must be able to judge the temperature of the blade solely by its incandescent color, a skill that is impossible in the bright light of day. He takes the blade, a dull, gray, earthen object, and prepares to commit it to the flames. The long, patient work of shaping and preparation is over. The birth of the blade is complete, but it is a stillborn thing. A perfect form without a spirit. It is soft, and it has no edge. In the next few critical moments, in a violent and terrifying baptism of fire and water, it will either be given its hard, sharp, and immortal soul, or it will be utterly destroyed. The entire work of the past weeks and the reputation of his ancestors all comes down to this. The forge is now a place of deep, reverent silence. A vessel waiting to hold a moment of pure, unrepeatable creation. The sun has long since set, and the world outside the thin paper screens is a black, moonless void. This darkness is not a hindrance. It is an essential tool. The master smith Masahiro must now read the language of the steel, a language written in the subtle, incandescent colors of heat. And his eyes must be perfectly attuned to the faintest of glows. With a quiet nod, he signals to his apprentice. Kenji begins to work the bellows, but his rhythm is different now. It is not the strong, steady beat of the forging process. It is a long, slow, and incredibly gentle breath, a soft and continuous sigh of air designed to create a fire that is not a raging inferno, but a bed of pure, even, and almost liquid heat. Masahiro carefully arranges the hand-selected pieces of pine charcoal, creating a long, narrow, uniform trench of perfect, glowing embers. This is the fire of the yakiire, the quench. It is the fiery baptism that will give the blade its spirit. Masahiro takes the blade, which is now dry and pale in its jacket of clay. He holds it by its long, unfinished temps, and he offers one final, silent prayer to the kami of the fire and the water. He then passes the blade into the long, glowing heart of the charcoal fire. The process of heating the blade is a slow and incredibly delicate dance. He does not let the blade rest in the fire. He moves it constantly back and forth from the tip to the base, and then back again. He rotates it with a steady, practiced hand, ensuring that every single part of the blade heats at exactly the same rate. An unevenly heated blade will warp or crack in the water. The heat must be perfectly uniform. His entire being is now focused on the thin, exposed line of the cutting edge, which is visible through its thin coating of clay. He watches as it begins to absorb the heat of the forge, its color beginning to change. First, it glows a dull, barely perceptible red like a dying ember. Then, as the heat builds, the color brightens, moving through the spectrum of incandescence. It becomes a deep, cherry red, then a brighter orange. He is not looking for a specific color on a chart. He is looking for a color that he knows not from a book, but from 1,000 repetitions, a color that lives in the memory of his own muscles and his own eyes. He is waiting for the precise shade of red orange that is often described by the ancient masters as the color of the rising sun in winter, or the color of the moon on a clear night in February. It is a specific, luminous, and almost translucent glow, the visual sign that the steel has reached the perfect temperature for its crystalline structure to transform. The moment when it comes is instantaneous. The color of the edge is perfect. There is no time for thought, no time for doubt. To hesitate for a single second is to risk overheating the blade, ruining months of work. "Mizu," he says, his voice sharp and clear in the silent forge. Right. It is the command for the water. In a single fluid and incredibly swift motion, he pulls the glowing blade from the fire. He rises from his kneeling position, takes a single stabilizing step towards the quenching trough. The misabun, and without any pause, he plunges the blade, edge first, into the trough of cold water. The world erupts in a violent, explosive hissus. A massive cloud of white steam erupts from the trough, instantly filling the entire forge with a thick, swirling, and impenetrable fog. The sound is the sound of a battle between two elemental forces, the furious protest of the fire as it is conquered by the water. You can feel the shock of the event as a vibration in the floor, a tremor that seems to shake the very foundations of the building. In that violent, chaotic, and fleeting moment, the magic is happening. On a microscopic level, The steel is undergoing a profound and violent transformation. The thinly coated edge, exposed to the full shock of the cold water, cools almost instantly. Its crystalline structure, which was in a state of soft potential in the fire, is frozen in time, transforming into a new structure called martensite. It is a structure that is incredibly dense, hard, and brittle. But the spine and the sides of the blade, protected by their thick, insulating jacket of clay, cool much, much more slowly. This slower cooling allows the steel in the core to form a different, softer, and more flexible crystalline structure. A mixture of ferrite and pearlite. And as these two transformations happen at different speeds, a third miracle occurs. The edge of the blade, as it hardens and transforms into martensite, expands slightly. The spine of the blade, as it cools more slowly, contracts. This differential in forces exerts an immense internal pressure on the blade itself. And so, the perfectly straight blade is forced to bend. It curves gracefully upwards, the spine compressing, the edge stretching. The iconic, elegant curve of the katana, the sori, is born in this moment, a natural and beautiful consequence of its own fiery baptism. The violent hissing subsides, replaced by the soft, dripping sound of condensing steam. The forge is a quiet, white, misty world. Masahiro stands motionless, his hand still holding the Thames of the sword, the blade still submerged in the now warm water of the trough. He is feeling the vibrations of the steel as it settles, listening to its new inner voice. Finally, with a slow and reverent motion, he lifts the blade from the water. It is a dark, strange, and ugly thing, its surface coated with the now cracked and peeling remnants of its clay jacket. It is warped slightly, and it has a beautiful, graceful curve that it did not have before. The great, dangerous, and irreversible act is complete. The blade now has its hardened edge, its resilient core, and its elegant shape. But the true result of the ordeal, the beauty of the Haman, and the question of whether the blade has survived without any fatal microscopic cracks, is still a secret, hidden beneath its earthen shell. The forge is a world of white mist and the smell of quenched hot steel. Masahiro, the master smith, stands perfectly still for a long moment, holding the dark, dripping blade. The violent, explosive energy of the quench has passed, leaving behind a deep, profound, and heavy silence. This is the moment of truth, the moment of judgment. The next few minutes will reveal whether the weeks of painstaking labor have resulted in a masterpiece or a piece of scrap metal. His first concern is for the integrity of the blade. The thermal shock the steel has just endured is so violent that even with the master's perfect control, microscopic fatal flaws can develop. With the blade still held in his tongs, he brings it close to his ear, and with a small, soft hammer, he gives the spine of the blade a gentle tap. He is listening. He is listening for the sound the blade makes, a clear, high, and pure ping that should sustain for a long moment. A dull thud, or a rattling buzz, would signify a hidden internal crack, a fatal wound in the steel that would render the entire sword useless. But the note is pure, it rings true. Next, still moving with a slow and deliberate calm, he runs his gloved fingers along the length of the blade, feeling for any physical sign of a crack or a fissure. His touch is as sensitive as a physician's, searching for any imperfection. He finds none. The blade, it seems, has survived its violent birth. Now comes the moment of revelation. The true beauty and success of the quench is still hidden beneath the cracked, gray, and ugly shell of the baked clay. Masahiro lays the sword on a padded anvil, and with a small wooden mallet, he begins to gently tap away the brittle coating. The clay falls away in chunks and sheets, revealing the steel beneath. As the clay is removed from the edge portion of the blade, you see it for the first time, the Hamun. It is not a simple line. It is a work of art, a beautiful, ghostly, an intricate pattern that has been permanently etched into the very soul of the steel. It is a milky, whitish, almost cloud-like line that separates the incredibly hard, crystalline structure of the edge from the darker, softer steel of the blade's body. The gentle, undulating wave pattern that Masahiro so carefully painted with the clay is now rendered in the very fabric of the metal, a perfect and permanent record of the meeting of fire and water. He inspects every inch of it, a quiet, satisfied smile touching the corners of his mouth. The control was perfect. The spirit of the blade has been born, and it is beautiful. But the work is not yet done. The blade, though it has survived, is now in a state of immense internal stress. The hardened edge, the martensite, is as brittle as glass. If it were to be used now, it would chip or even shatter at the first blow. The fiery, aggressive spirit that has been forced into the steel must now be gently soothed, relaxed, and given a measure of resilience. This is the process of tempering the yakimadoshi. It is a process of far greater subtlety than the violent quench. It is a gentle application of low heat, a quiet whisper to the steel after the ordeal of the shout. Masahiro carefully cleans and polishes a small section of the blade's spine until the raw steel gleams. This small polished window will be his guide. He then builds a new, much smaller, and more gentle fire in the forge. He does not place the blade in the fire itself. Instead, he heats a large, thick block of copper until it glows with a dull red heat. The blade is then laid upon this hot block of copper, spine down. The heat begins to slowly, gently creep into the blade, conducted through the soft steel of the spine. Masahiro's attention is now fixed on the small, polished window he has created on the blade. As the steel heats, its surface begins to oxidize, and this thin layer of oxide creates a subtle and beautiful spectrum of colors. This is his thermometer. He is watching for a very specific color.
Ow.
The polished steel will turn a pale, straw yellow, then a deeper gold, then a brownish orange, and finally a purple and a blue. Each color represents a precise temperature, a specific degree to which the steel's internal structure is being relaxed. For a sword, the desired hardness and toughness is found in the very early stages of this color spectrum. Masahiro is waiting for the steel to turn a perfect pale straw yellow. The moment he sees this color appear in his polished window, he removes the blade from the heat and allows it to cool slowly in the air. The process is complete. The internal stresses of the quench have been relieved. A tiny, almost imperceptible amount of the edge's absolute hardness has been sacrificed, but in exchange, the blade has gained a profound new toughness. It is now no longer a brittle, angry thing. It is a strong, stable, and resilient being. It can now bend, it can endure, and it can hold its razor-sharp edge. The smith's work, the work of fire and water of the hammer and the anvil, is now finished. He holds the blade in his hands. It is still a rough, dark, and unlovely thing to look at, its surface scaled and its colors muted. But its inner nature, its soul, is now complete and perfect. It has been born, it has been baptized in fire, and its spirit has been tempered. All that remains is for its true hidden beauty to be revealed by the patient, meticulous work of the polisher. With the tempering process complete, the blade has finally achieved its perfect internal balance of hardness and toughness. The violent ordeals of the forge, the hammering, the fiery quenchar, now over, the work that remains for the smith is one of final subtle adjustments. The last personal touches of the creator before he sends his creation out into the world. The first of these tasks is to perfect the blade's curve, the sori. The quenching process, with its differential cooling, creates the blade's beautiful natural curve, but it is not always perfect. There can be slight, almost imperceptible warps or inconsistencies in the line. The final shaping, or sorie, is the master smith's opportunity to correct these. This is not a process of brute force, but of immense focused skill. Masahiro sights down the length of the blade, his experienced eye tracing the elegant arc from the hilt to the tip. He holds it up to the light, turning it, feeling its balance. His mind comparing the real curve to the ideal, perfect curve that he holds in his imagination. He identifies a small section of the spine that is slightly too straight. To correct this, he heats a small rectangular block of copper in the forge until it glows a dull red. He then places the heated copper block into a special notch in a large tree stump that serves as a workbench. He takes the sword and, with a precise and gentle pressure, he uses the heated copper block as a fulcrum to make a minute adjustment to the curve of the spine. He does this without heating the blade itself, as that would ruin the delicate temper he has just achieved. It is a slow, careful process of pushing and leveraging, of finessing the steel into its final perfect form. He checks the curve again and again until he is satisfied. The line is now a single, graceful, and unbroken sweep. The next step is the first, rough polish, a process known as arizori. The purpose of this is not to make the blade beautiful, but to perform one last crucial quality control check. The blade's surface is still covered in a dark scaled coating from its final heatings. This rough skin could be hiding small, fatal flaws, a tiny crack from the quench, a slight delamination from an imperfect weld. Masahiro kneels before a great coarse water stone, a rough gray block of granite that is kept constantly wet. He takes the blade in both hands and begins to draw it, slowly and methodically, back and forth across the surface of the stone. The sound is a loud, grating, and wet rasp. A thick gray metallic slurry begins to form on the surface of the stone. The work is physically demanding, requiring a steady pressure and a consistent angle. He works for several hours, patiently grinding away the dark fire-scaled surface of the blade. Slowly, the true, clean steel beneath is revealed. It is a dull, milky gray, covered in the coarse scratches of the rough stone, but it is a uniform and honest surface. He inspects every inch of it, his eyes searching for the faintest hairline crack or imperfection. He finds none. The weld was true, the quench was successful, the blade is perfect. Now, and only now, is the smith's work truly done. There is only one final act to perform, the act that will forever tie this blade to its creator. This is the signing of the Tang the Mei. He takes the blade, now clean but unadorned, to a small, specialized anvil. With a very fine, sharp-pointed chisel and a small, light hammer, he begins to inscribe his name onto the nakago, the rough, unfinished tang of the sword, the part that will be hidden beneath the hilt. The work is slow and requires a calligrapher's skill. Tap, tap, tap. The small, sharp sounds are the only noise in the quiet forge. He carefully chisels the characters of his name, Masahiro. Beneath it, he cuts the name of his province, Bizan, and finally the date of the blade's creation. This is his signature. It is his mark of pride, his guarantee of quality, and his act of taking responsibility for this object of both beauty and terrible purpose. It is a humble, hidden signature, not meant for public display, but for the eyes of the connoisseurs, the polishers, and the other smiths who, generations from now, may one day disassemble the sword and see the name of the man who first gave it life. He holds the finished blade in his hands. It is not yet the beautiful, shimmering object it will become. It is a dull, gray, and heavy piece of steel, its edges sharp, but not yet honed to a razor's keenness. But in its perfect shape, in its graceful curve, and in the faint, ghostly line of the hamon, he can see the promise of its future beauty. I've taken raw, chaotic earth, and through a long ordeal of fire, water, and steel, he has imbued it with a soul. His work is complete. He wraps the blade in a sheath of clean white rice paper, and then in a simple silk cloth. It is no longer his to keep. The blade will now leave his hands and begin the next stage of its journey, a new, long, ancient process of being awakened to its full beauty by the hands of another master craftsman, the polisher. The fiery baptism is over. The quiet life of the patient stone is about to begin. The sword, now a structurally complete but visually unremarkable object, leaves the smoky, percussive world of the forge. Its journey is not yet over. It travels now from the hands of the smith, a master of fire and steel, to the workshop of a different kind of master, the tagishi, the sword polisher. This is a craft that requires not immense physical strength, but immense unwavering patience. A surgeon's steady hand and a spirit as calm and as clear as the water he works with. The polisher's workshop is a world of quiet, wet stillness. It is a clean, well-lit room with large paper screens that slide open to a small, serene garden, allowing the pure, natural light of the day to illuminate his work. The air here does not smell of charcoal and hot metal, but of damp stone, of metal, and of the faint, clean scent of polishing oil. There is no anvil, no great bellows. The heart of this room is a low wooden bench and a series of shallow, water-filled tubs. And lining the walls on carefully ordered shelves are the polisher's true tools. Dozens upon dozens of water stones, or toishi. Hey! They are beautiful objects in themselves, blocks of stone in every shade of gray, brown, and green, each with a different, specific, and almost secret purpose. You, the apprentice, have been sent by your master Masahiro to deliver the blade and to observe the beginning of the polish as part of your education. The polisher, an old, quiet man named Lord Ishikawa, accepts the cloth-wrapped blade with a reverent bow. He unwraps it and holds it up to the light, his eyes accustomed to seeing the subtlest of details, scanning every inch of its dull, gray surface. He is not looking for beauty, not yet. He is reading the story of the blade's creation, assessing the quality of the smith's work, and planning his own long and patient campaign. The process of polishing a katana, is a long and multi-stage journey that can take several weeks of full-time, dedicated labor. It begins with the foundation polish, the shitaji togi. The purpose of this first stage is not to make the blade shine, but to refine its geometry to a state of absolute perfection. Lord Ishikawa selects his first set of stones. They are coarse, heavy, and rough to the touch. He kneels at his low bench in the formal seiza posture, a position he will maintain for hours on end. He does not move the stone. He holds the heavy, unadorned blade in both hands, and he moves the blade back and forth over the surface of the stationary, wetted stone. The work is physically demanding, requiring a powerful and yet incredibly controlled motion. The sound is a low, wet, grinding she, a rhythmic and deeply meditative sound that is the only noise in the quiet room. Thick gray metallic slurry, a mixture of stone particles, steel, and water, begins to form on the surface of the stone. His focus is absolute. He is not just rubbing the blade. He is using the abrasive power of the stone to perfect the lines and planes that the smith created with the hammer. He works on the flat sides of the blade, ensuring they are perfectly, flawlessly flat. He works on the crisp ridgeline, the shinogi, refining its geometry until it is a sharp, perfect, and unbroken line that flows from the hilt to the tip. He works on the complex, curved surface of the tip, the kisaki, a task that requires a special set of smaller, shaped stones, and a skill that takes decades to master. He works for a full day, then another, with this single coarse stone, till every surface of the blade is geometrically perfect. Then he sets that stone aside and moves to the next one in the sequence, a stone of a slightly finer grit, and the entire patient process begins again. He must remove every single microscopic scratch left by the previous, coarser stone, while at the same time perfectly maintaining the crisp, geometric lines he has just established. It is a work of incredible, painstaking precision. His hands, though they look soft, are immensely strong and steady. His mind is in a state of deep, unwavering concentration. As he works through these first few foundation stones, the blade begins to transform. The dull, fire-scaled, and file-marked object that you brought from the forge is slowly disappearing. In its place, a new object is emerging. It is not yet shiny. It has a soft, matte, and uniform gray finish, like the surface of a winter mist. But its lines are now razor-sharp, its planes so perfectly flat that they catch the light in a single, unbroken sheet. The blade's true, elegant, and deadly form has been revealed. After more than a week of this continuous, repetitive, and deeply focused labor, the foundation polish is complete. The blade is now a perfect geometric sculpture in steel. Its rough, violent birth in the fire of the forge has been erased, replaced by a cool, calm, and intellectual perfection. But its soul, the intricate, beautiful patterns of the hamun and the folded hodes still sleeping, hidden beneath the uniform matte surface. The work of the patient stone has only just begun. The next stage of the polish will be a process not of shaping, but of awakening. With the foundation of the blade's geometry now perfectly established, the polisher, Lord Ishikawa, moves into the second and final phase of his work, the finishing polish, the shiage. The purpose of this stage is not to shape the blade, but to awaken its hidden beauty, to reveal the intricate details of the steel's soul that were created in the fire of the forge. For this work, the large, coarse stones are set aside. He now turns to a series of much smaller, finer, and more precious water stones. Some of these stones are so rare and valuable that they are treasured and passed down through generations of polishers. Each stone has a specific purpose, a different personality, and is used to bring out a different aspect of the blade's character. The process now becomes even more slow, more delicate, and more intimate. The polisher no longer moves the entire blade over a large stationary stone. Instead, he now holds the blade still and moves the small stone, lubricated with water, over the surface of the steel. Works on a tiny section at a time, no larger than a coin. His touch is incredibly light, his movements precise and controlled. He works his way, stone by stone, through an ever finer sequence of grits. With each new stone, the coarse scratches left by the previous one are erased, replaced by a new, finer, and more uniform set of scratches, till the scratches themselves become so fine that they are invisible to the naked eye, and the surface of the steel begins to take on a deep, lustrous, and liquid-like sheen. It is during this slow, patient process that the two great aesthetic features of the blade are finally revealed. First is the hada, the grain of the steel. The thousands of microscopic layers that were created by Masahiro's repeated folding and hammering now become visible on the surface of the blade. It is not a uniform surface, but a subtle, beautiful, and complex pattern, like the grain of a fine piece of wood or the patterns of flowing water. It is a visible record of the smith's hard labor. Then the true miracle appears. As the polisher works on the edge of the blade, the hamon, the temper line, begins to emerge from the steel like a developing image. The milky, cloud-like line that was a faint ghost after the quench is now brought into sharp, clear, and breathtakingly beautiful relief. He uses the finest of his fingerstones, tiny slivers of stone that he manipulates with his thumb, to give the hamon its final, brilliant whiteness. The intricate, wave-like pattern that Masahiro painted with the clay is now a permanent, shimmering river of white crystals, a stark and beautiful contrast to the darker, deeper gray of the blade's body. The final step of the polish is a purely cosmetic and almost magical one. The polisher takes a hazuya stone, an incredibly fine-grained stone, and uses it to whiten the hamon even further. He then takes a gizuya stone to darken the body of the blade, creating the ultimate contrast. Finally, he takes a nugui, a secret mixture of fine steel powder and oil, and rubs it into the blade to bring out its final deep luster. The very last step is to burnish the back of the blade, the spine, with a polished steel needle. He draws the needle along the spine, creating a mirror-bright, shining surface. This is the polisher's signature, a final act of completion. After 3 weeks of continuous, silent, and patient work, the polisher's craft is complete. He holds the finished blade up to the light. It is no longer a dull, gray, and functional object. It is a work of art, a thing of profound and dangerous beauty. Its surface has a deep, almost liquid luster that seems to shift and change with the light. The complex wood-grain pattern of the hada speaks of its inner strength, and the brilliant, white, and cloud-like hamon dances along its edge like a captured river of moonlight. The blade is no longer just a piece of steel. It is a landscape. It is a story. With the final, mirror-like burnishing of its spine, the polisher's long and patient work is complete. The blade is carefully cleaned of all stone slurry and oil. A light coating of fine clove oil is applied to its surface to protect it from rust. It is then wrapped in a new, clean sheet of rice paper, and then in a soft silk cloth. It is no longer a mere object of steel. It is a treasure, a work of art whose inner beauty has been fully and patiently revealed. But a blade alone is not a sword. The creation of the katana is a collaborative art, a symphony of many different master craftsmen, each with their own specialized and highly respected skill. The finished blade now leaves the quiet, wet world of the polisher and begins the final stage of its journey. First, it is taken to the workshop of the sayashi, the scabbard maker. He is a master of wood. He takes 2 perfectly seasoned and matched pieces of honoki wood, a type of magnolia that is light, strong, and has a low acid content that will not damage the steel. With the blade itself as his guide, he meticulously carves the interior of the 2 pieces of wood, creating a channel that is a perfect, exact mirror of the blade's shape and curve. The fit must be so precise that when the blade is sheathed, it is held securely, without rattling, but with no friction that could mar its perfect polish. When the carving is complete, the 2 halves of the scabbard, the saya, are glued together with a fine rice paste and left to dry. The exterior is then sanded to a perfect smoothness and given dozens of thin, patient layers of black or red lacquer, a process that can take weeks to complete. Next, the blade is taken to the workshop of the tsukamakishi, the hilt maker. He carves the wooden core of the hilt, the tsuka, from the same magnolia wood, ensuring a perfect, tight fit over the blade's tang, the nakago. He then covers this wooden core with samagawa, the rough, pebbled skin of a stingray. This provides a durable and incredibly grippy surface. Finally, with an almost mathematical precision, he begins the art of the hilt trapping, the tsukamaki. He takes a long, flat braid of silk or cotton, the tsukato, and wraps it in an intricate overlapping diamond pattern, creating a binding that is both beautiful and exceptionally functional, providing the user with a secure and comfortable grip. At the same time, the metal fittings, the koshire, are being created by another master, the kinko. This includes the tsuba, the handguard, which can be a simple, functional piece of blackened iron, or an incredibly ornate, sculpted piece of art in itself, decorated with inlaid gold and silver images of dragons, flowers, or scenes from mythology. He also creates the collar, the fuchi, and the pummel cap, the kashira, that secure the ends of the hilt. Finally, all of these separate, masterfully crafted pieces are brought together for the final assembly. The polished blade is fitted with its habaki, a small metal collar at its base that ensures a snug fit in the scabbard. The guard is slid over the tang, followed by the wrapped hilt, small bamboo peg. The makugi is then passed through a hole in the hilt and the tang, locking all the pieces together into a single, solid, and perfectly balanced whole. The finished blade is then slid with a soft, satisfying hiss into its perfectly fitted, lacquered scabbard. The process is complete. What began as a rough, porous lump of smelted iron sand has been transformed through the patient, dedicated, and spiritual labor of a dozen master craftsmen into a finished katana. The completed sword is presented for a final inspection back to the man who first gave it life, the smith Masahiro. He takes the sword in his hands. It feels light, alive, and perfectly balanced. He draws the blade from its scabbard, and the polished steel seems to capture and amplify the light in the dim forge. He sees the beautiful cloud-like river of the Hamon, the subtle wood-grain texture of the hata. He sees his own reflection, the face of an old man in the mirror-bright surface of the steel. He holds in his hands not a weapon, but a physical manifestation of a philosophy, It is an object of perfect harmony, the harmony of the hard and the soft, of the beautiful and the deadly, of the simple and the complex. It is a testament to a lifetime of quiet, focused, and dedicated craft. His work and the work of all the other masters is done. The soul of the steel has been awakened, and it is ready. Our journey with the Japanese swordsmith is now at an end. We have heard the rhythmic clang of the hammer on steel, felt the intense heat of the forge, and witnessed the slow, patient revelation of a blade's hidden beauty. It was a world where a craftsman was a priest, where a block of steel was believed to have a soul, and where the creation of a deadly weapon was considered one of the highest and most spiritual of art forms. That world of fire, water, and the patient scraping of the polishing stone has now faded away, leaving only the quiet of the present moment. The smith's long and patient craft is done, and now so is yours. There is nothing left to do but to rest, to let go of the day, and to drift into the deep and peaceful sleep that you deserve. Rest now, sleep well.